If your jazz solos feel like they're missing that secret sauce that pro-level jazz musicians have, then you could be missing out on one of these strategies coming up. So these 3 strategies I'm gonna share with you are strategies that I hear professional jazz musicians and the jazz greats using all the time. They're also deficiencies that I've noticed in my own students. So before we go ahead and talk about the first one, listen to this example. So the first strategy I want you to be aware of is called theme and variation. Theme and variation. So this is actually the chord progression to Blues for Alice. It's a Charlie Parker head. We have an F major 7th chord to start with, and we have this simple theme, right, over top of that F major 7th chord. Then we go to an E minor 7 flat 5 to an A7, and we keep that same rhythmic structure, and most of the notes, we just change one note. It's a C sharp note. So the C sharp is the 3rd of the A7. So we're just changing one note to reflect the chord change. So again, over the F major 7, and then over the E minor 7 flat 5 A7, right? Now the next chord change is D minor 7 to G7. And so we're gonna change the note very slightly. We're gonna change the second note to a D natural note. And that fits perfectly over top of the D minor 7 to G7, but we're still taking the same rhythmic structure and essential harmonic structure as well, playing the arpeggios. Now, over the C minor 7, F7, we change just one note. The second note, we change it to an E flat. So it sounds like this. And that E flat is the 3rd of the C minor 7th chord. So it works perfectly, sounds really good. So the theme and variation is simply taking a simple idea and transforming it over top of the different chord progressions. Right? So even without making big changes and trying to play a bunch of licks over top, professional jazz musicians are constantly doing this, developing their solos organically this way. So if you can start implementing this just a little bit in your solos, rather than playing random strings of licks and things that have nothing to do with each other, immediately you're going to start leveling up your jazz solos. The second strategy is very simple. It is this. It is space. So pro-level jazz musicians are constantly using space in their solos. So we start out with, and by the way, these are the chord changes to so what or impressions. And leaving space in between your phrases allows them to make a statement and breathe. So even just these 2 notes, right, over the D minor 7th, give us a little start to what we're about to approach. And the next phrase goes a little bit longer to continue the idea. And then we have another space. Now we continue the line again. Now there's another version of space that jazz musicians will use, and it's not necessarily rests, it's just longer note values. So for example, these half notes here that break up this 8th note phrase really give it that breathable feeling to it. So again, the line goes, and then we go into a longer 8th note line again. But those half notes in there give it that sense of space even without having rests. And I hear a lot of amateur jazz musicians playing long streams of lines and notes that just continue and don't have a lot of melodic direction per se, and don't give us that space that we need to hear. So when we're able to make strategic choices about the space we want to have in our jazz lines, immediately it's going to start elevating them to the next level. third strategy is longer flowing eighth note lines. Longer flowing eighth note lines. This is something I hear a lot of my inner circle members doing wrong, is they're playing almost too much space in smaller broken up phrases and not enough longer eighth note phrases like in this particular line. So what we want to do is break up our lines so that yes, we're adding the space in there and we're adding those shorter phrases, but then every once in a while pulling off a nice long eighth note line. It's really a satisfying moment when I hear a line like this being played, because it gives the listener the sounds that they're really wanting to hear, especially when we have these awesome beboppy ideas like in this particular line. So be sure you're practicing actually playing longer eighth note lines. And oftentimes what I'll actually have my students do as an exercise is improvise over an entire jazz standard or a section of a jazz standard only playing eighth notes. Not that we want to play like that in the long run, but we want to develop that ability to play those longer lines, get used to doing it so that it does end up coming out in our improvisations later on. So these strategies will really help you elevate your jazz playing right away. But if you're still feeling like there's issues and you're not satisfied with what's going on, there could be other things you need to address too. So I highly recommend the video on the screen right now, which is called Why Your Jazz Playing Isn't Improving. And I go over 10 reasons why. Let's see if any of those will help diagnose your issues as well. So click on that video on the screen right now. That's all for today's video. Like this video if you found it valuable. Make sure you subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video. Cheers.